It wasn't okay, but I am. I didn't want to come into this incarnation. That I know. My body wilted out of my mother, constricted by the umbilical cord before I was rushed into the microwave, as my dad called it. The hums of the incubator trying to bring me fully into my aliveness. I was tired. Not again, I mumbled in my head. Not again. I was specifically promised the love of the divine mother in this incarnation. I was sure of this. My mother reminds me of that awful day as one of the hardest of her life. The doctor had misplaced the epidural, causing her to slip a disc in her back, one that she would never fully recover from. My birthday has become her birth story day, a day I relived the trauma of the burden on the world I became. It wasn't okay, but I am. Throughout my childhood, I felt the weight of the world. As a highly sensitive person, everything just felt like too much. My family processed the world very differently than I did. Of that, I was sure. We had our own burdens and we tossed them around like hot potatoes. My older brother beat me and regularly locked me up in a closet. Breaking my toys was fun for him, and hiding under my bed and bursting out of the closet when I was sleeping were regular practices he found entertaining, while for me caused me terror. I was afraid every day. My father had learned how to channel his anger the same way his father had, through the cracking of the belt on our backsides. I'm not even sure I felt the cracking of the belt the way my brothers did, but through my emotionally sensitive skin, I experienced every lashing with them. My mother learned how to process her pain through avoidance. So she couldn't save us from the abuse, so she pretended it didn't exist and buried herself into her academics. She began a school to care for over 100 children. 100 children were now going to be safe in her care, while the 4 she birthed were left behind in danger. It wasn't okay, but I am. I learned how to play small. I learned how to be the good girl. I learned how to avoid being beaten. I became the caretaker for my mother. I could help her process her emotions. I must be good at this because this is what she asks of me. As my parents' marriage became more toxic, I became more sick. My first suicide attempt came on at age 9. I was so tired. I stayed home from school regularly. Migraines were my new normal. The pressure of the world was too much, but I found that when I could be alone in my own energy, I could find a peace that existed only in an empty home. Once everyone would leave, I would flutter around the living room like the figure skaters on the Olympics I wanted to be. I would twirl in the air and my fingers would move the energy around me, and without the words to explain it, I would begin to feel better. When I was about 12, I asked and received a she shed for Christmas, and I moved into the backyard. I understood that the energy of the house felt different than the energy that I had cultivated in my newly designed creative space. And I began losing myself in music and poetry. And now I wasn't just confined to the experience of being in hard emotions. I was learning how to process them through my innate desire to create something from them. At this point, my mom was telling me the reason that my dad worked late every night was because he had another family with other children he loved more. While my body wasn't registering this as truth, I couldn't understand why my mom would feed me the lies that my dad didn't love me and that's why he wouldn't show up for me. So I began to accept it as truth. My mother didn't love me. I broke her back. My brother didn't love me, and he made sure I knew every single day. No one thought I was worth protecting from him, so why would my dad love me? I guess it would make sense for him to go and find a new family. Surely I had imagined what that would be like for myself. It wasn't okay, but I am. I spent a lot of time in and out of psychiatric hospitals as a teen. Seems suicidal ideation was just a part of growing up for everyone, right? The hospitals were grim, and I watched girls with eating disorders binge and purge, girls who had experienced sex abuse have boys in and out of their room late at night. I remember one girl having a seizure right after the fire alarm went off, reminding her of her home that burned to the ground. I remember another girl slitting her wrist with her compact mirror because she didn't feel pretty enough. I'll never forget Mary, the one nurse who strangely felt like a mother to me. She didn't have a birthday, she told me. She had been so abused growing up, no one ever thought she deserved a birthday. I felt so deeply into her experience that I never forgot it. I never went back into an inpatient facility after meeting her. I cried deeply for Mary. It wasn't okay, but I am. I was living in Austin, Texas when coronavirus shut down our city on St. Patrick's Day. My friends and I were going from nights at the bars to bouncing around our friends' houses, semi-afraid at all the unknowns around what was happening on the planet, and somewhat really enjoying this new paradigm of working from home and wildly breaking out of the routines I had. But when my soul brother took his life, it was like a giant slap across the face from the universe to wake the fuck up. If I was co-creating this reality, I was being shown much too uncomfortably close now how near to suicide I was. By now, I had lost my father to suicide, my girlfriend, and my soul brother. Immediately following my dad's death, my mother had purchased burial plots for my little brother and I, repeatedly telling us that we would not survive his death. My mom was right. I could hear my inner child whimper. That same year, my mom fell ill, and my brother thought it was best for me to go to her. Without a word, with the world in a place of uncertainty and my mom needing a lot of medical care, it seemed like the choiceless choice. I quickly resumed my family role of caregiver and emotional alchemist in service of my mother, and I moved to Sarasota, Florida. Ram Dass says it best. If you think you're enlightened, go and live with your family. It had been 15 years since I cohabitated with my mother, and it didn't take long for me to realize I wasn't feeling well. Watching my mother navigate life post my father's passing was deeply triggering for me. I was watching up close and personally from a new seat of awareness just how traumatized my mother really was. I had always known her to have her issues and unresolved traumas, but this had reached new heights. After almost 3 years together, I have watched her transform every part of her physical body. Most recently, her yoni. It had become intoxicatingly evident that the voice in my head that had been struggling with unworthiness and perfectionism and fear of rejection and abandonment was none other than my mother. I had built up a story that my mother didn't love me, and now I could step back as I helped her walk inside the house from yet another plastic surgery and realize, how in the world could my mother have loved me if she didn't have any love for herself? Who spends their life savings completely altering their appearance? Someone who hates themselves. That's who. I had spent 40 years of my life truly believing I was a burden to this world and unlovable by my own mother. I had even opted out of motherhood, afraid I couldn't do it right. Now I knew with painstaking accuracy that my mom did love me, but from the moment I entered this plane, she was scared to death for me. Scared for me to walk in her footsteps. And through a life lived in fear, I had followed her every tragic step. It wasn't okay, but I am. I've had a deep knowing in my life that this would be my last go around. This lifetime would be it. I had been promised the love of the Divine Mother, and I was ready to be swallowed up whole by her. If this world is a holographic universe, and if we co-create our reality, this means that nothing is happening to us. It is only happening for us. It took me a long time to get here, and I wasn't okay, but I am now. What has happened to me has been nothing short of a miracle. Through a lifetime of prayer and overcoming challenges in order to know myself deeper, I finally realized the Divine Mother was always within me. I thought back to my childhood and the spirits that made themselves known to me when I was feeling depressed. I thought about how my girlfriends and I played Ouija and had seances, and how my guardian angel's name came through to me when I was 11, and it was Sarah LaCali. I think of my grandfather who appeared at my bedside after he passed when I was 14 for nearly every night for a month, just to lullaby me to bed. I thought about Nurse Mary and the angelic presence that I never forgot about her. I thought about my friend Holly, who had passed from cancer, that I called my joy guide. Whenever I felt a playful idea come online or the invitation to meet an uncomfortable edge, I felt my friend nudging me to play along. When I chose to enroll in a yoga teacher training program, I couldn't believe the synchronicities that unfolded, securing my spot at my favorite yoga studio. I'll never forget the way the sun shone down on me through the window of that church while I was learning more about making yoga more than a practice, but a lifestyle. It wasn't even a question. Something greater than me was orchestrating this, and I could feel it. I sobbed in my car leaving that church at the overwhelm that I was being moved through life. I could feel my dad's essence with me all the time, so there was no question. I had a whole team of guides on the other side. I was a bit nervous driving to the octopus sanctuary. I had manifested a sweat lodge, and within 24 hours, I was on my way to some strange man's land. It was a bit far and rural, and wait, is this someone's house? What am I even doing? I thought as I started to hear my mother's voice fearfully saying in my ear that this was much too dangerous for a girl like me. What I didn't realize then was that a sweat lodge is a representation of a woman's womb. That sweat lodge opened me up in a new way. My experience was unbelievable. I had found my way back into the arms of the Divine Mother. Ironically, she looked unlike anyone I had ever seen. She came through in visions like a blue-skinned octopus named Kali. Without knowing how I knew, I felt Kali bringing me through a complete transformation, one that was wildly uncomfortable. But what was shedding now, finally, were the deep layers of trauma in order to make room for a complete rebirth. It's been quite a ride since that communion. The owner of that sweat lodge is my beloved now, and I have no doubt that his mother sent for me and that I heard her call through that womb. I feel of the love of the Divine Mother deeply on that land. I am still learning how to use my gift of empathy as a blessing, and I've had the pleasure of praying in temples and merging with her. After one enlightened experience at the Temple of the Universe, I drove to my beloveds. He said I was glowing when I walked in the door, and I'll never forget the feeling that came over me. The first time my partner witnessed me in my experience that was becoming my norm on my own, I had merged into oneness. As I gazed out the window, my body broke into full sobs, overwhelmed by the perfection of it all. As I looked at my hands and fingers, I repeated aloud the data I was picking up. I am the cosmos experiencing creation through me. My partner looked in disbelief as a whole bunch of species of birds, from hawks to blue jays to cardinals and robins, all flew and perched on nearby limbs looking in at us. I was Mother Nature, and they were feeling drawn to me. I sobbed with overwhelming gratitude for this life. I have these experiences regularly now. Merging is basically my favorite thing. Becoming so present and aware of the feelings in my body and surrendering with trust and acceptance is what they are. In what they are has shifted how I operate through life. It's not about what I do anymore. It's about who I be while I do it. My empathy gives me a built-in truth decoder. If someone isn't living in alignment with their truth, I can feel it. It inspires me to operate from a place of authenticity because I feel like it's like fingers on a chalkboard when I experience the other, and that's just not the experience that I want to radiate or observe. I thought I was going to be born into the Divine Mother's love, and some days I had felt cheated of that. But recently, while taking my dog for a walk, I stood outside my mother's house. It was another surgery day, and this time my brother and his partner had unexpectedly shown up to step in for me. A very holy gift from the Divine Mother. As I peered in my bags, preparing my transition into what is hopefully my final home, the arms of my soulmate, I smiled, tears welling up in my eyes. Of course, my greatest trauma was my birth. It has allowed me to take full responsibility for everything in my life. And that has been unbelievably empowering for me. My greatest challenge has been my relationship with my mother. But the Divine Mother's love is far too great to feel absent for long. It has been my journey to become the mother, to reparent myself into the woman that I am today. If I got to create my template for my final life, it would be this exact one, which I confidently know that I co-created at this point. My journey would be my trip back to myself, back to Mother Nature, back to Pachamama, back to sisterhood, back into the arms of the beloved. It had to be like this for me. If I hadn't experienced so much heartbreak, how in the world would I be able to embody the love of the mother? The mother that forgives, the mother that loves without condition, the mother that loves without closing her heart off or shutting it down. She loves without prejudice or logic. I couldn't be more in love than I am now. I wasn't meant for motherhood in the typical sense of the word. I was meant to be the bridge, to help people like me who had lost their connection with source love. I'm here to help them cross that bridge back home to themselves. I'm here to help them remember. My partner and I regularly hold ceremonies at that sanctuary now, and it's become known as a starseed portal. My favorite part of every ceremony is listening to people reflect on their journeys because they all say the same thing. Mother Mary is here. Yes, yes, she is. It didn't always feel okay, but it is now. Namaste. I love you.